Hello everyone, I'm Supriya from second year BCom Corporate Secretaryship. Today, I'm here to give a book review of a comedy novel, Three Men in a Boat. First, we'll see about the author of the comedy novel, Three Men in a Boat. Jerome Jerome, popularly known as Jerome K. Jerome, was an English writer and humorist, best known for his comedy travelogue, Three Men in a Boat. He was born on 2nd May 1859 in United Kingdom. He was an author, playwright, and an editor. At the age of 21, he decided to become a journalist. Jerome has numerous works to his credits. He had written and published several collections of essays, novels, and short stories. But he unfortunately left the world at the age of 68 on 14th June 1927. It's a story about a boat trip that Jerome takes his friends George and William Samuel Harris to a vacation. This is called a comic masterpiece of Jerome K. Jerome. Now, let's look into the novel. The Three Men in a Boat starts with three friends named George, Jerome, and Harris smoking together in their apartments in London. They all are hypochondriacs. Here, hypochondriacs refers to a people who takes a small sneezing disease into a serious disease and always talks about their illness. After doing research on various diseases in the British Museum, Jerome somehow concluded that he has all the illness known to a man except for housemaid's knee. Housemaid's knee is a small swelling in the sac at the front of the knee called the perpetual brutisus. The friends then made a plan of taking a vacation together as it would be a good for their health. After some controversies, they decided to spend a week rowing up with the Thames with their dog Montmorency. The men then made necessary arrangements for the trip and chose to bring a cover for the boat and sleep in it instead of carrying a tent or living it in. They make a long list of items but then realize that they ideally need to only carry the essential. Although they are friends, Jay doesn't really like Harris and compares him lent to Jay's incompliment Uncle Podger. They finally decide to bring a hamper of food, clothing, a methylated spirit stove for cooking, and cover for the boat. The friends slept too long but ultimately get out on a train to Kingston, from which they will start their journey on the first morning of the trip. Jay mentions some local landmarks including Hampertown Court and some pubs that Queen Elizabeth dined in. Harris narrates an incident about getting lost in the Hajj maze at Hampertown town. The men then go through their first lock, which is canal set off from the river that allows boats to pass through a steep area. Jay immediately talks about how irritating it is when women wear boating clothes that are too flimsy to get wet. George then moves away from his group to do some work for an employer in Seapertown. Harris then gives the idea of visiting a cemetery to see an interesting tombstone, but Jay rejects his plan. Harris then falls into a food hamper while trying to find a bottle of whiskey. When Jay and Harris have a lunch break on the riverbank, a man lands up, blackmailing them and accuses them of trespassing the area. Harris, who has a tall and huge frame, physically intimidates the visitor and they carry on their journey. Jay talks about some more local points of interest and the two men join George in Shippertown. Harris and Jay persuade George that they should tow the boat from the shore, which can be a difficult task leading to problems if the tower becomes distracted. The men then have an enjoyable dinner and sleep in the boat at night. The next morning, they get up early and George narrates a story about forgetting to win his watch and starting his workday 6 hours early to Jay, who then falls in the water and Harris tries to make scrambled egg but is unsuccessful. The men passes Datchet and remember the time when they were trying to find a place to sleep. They are on another trip when the inns were full. They all sleep at inn in Marrow on the night Montgomery runs after a big cat but gets quite scared to attack it. The next day, they cross a more interesting historical landmarks including Bisham Abbey. Their drinking water gets over and they get upheld with a local lock keeper asks them to drink from the river. Harris loses his balance and falls off the edge of a clutch while eating supper. The next evening, they make delicious Irish stew and George Merle plays the banjoros, but he is just an amateur and his soul had that Harris and Jay request him to never plan banjoro for the rest of the trip. George and Jay go out to have a couple of drinks in the town of Henley the same night, but get lost on their way back. They somehow manage to find Harris sleeping in the boat, who then explains to them that he had moved the boat as he was attacked by a frog of aggressive swans. The friends pass through the reading and as they approach Goring, they see a woman corpse floating in the water. They later find out that a lady had drowned herself after having a child before marriage and was unable to support it. The men trying to wash their clothes in the Thames, but the clothes become dirtier and their effort goes in vain. That night, they again go out for a drink at the pub in the Wallingford, and they later move toward Oxford, where they would turn back and come over to London. Jay talks about an incident where he and George had gone for rounding and running a professional photographer's pictures by falling over at the same moment. Jay goes to describe the attractions of Donchester, Ambington, and Clifton, which include Roman ruins and the grave of a man who had 197 children. They then steer through a tricky stretch of river near Oxford and spend 2 days there. Jay disrupts the story and warns the readers that it is not a good idea to rent a boat in Oxford as they are poor quality. While on the way back from the Oxford, it starts raining and the men land up being cold, wet and drenched. They soon settle abandoning the boat and spend the rest of the trip at the inn. Then, that night, they indulge in circumstances, super and feel happy about their decision, abandon the boat when things get too tough. Montmorency barks in the agreement in the end. And that is how the story ends. And now we talk about the characters. In this story, we have really 5 characters. First, Jay. Jay is the narrator of the novel, whose character is mostly based on Jerome himself. He has a dog named Montmorency and sees himself as intelligent, hardworking, and competent. The second one is George, a friendly banker and one of Jay's best friends. And comes Harris, a friend of George and Jay, who joins them on the trip. Jay doesn't like Harris and always criticizes him for being lazy and uncultured. And comes the hero, Montmorency. Jay's living for terrier dogs who loves fighting with the other dogs and hunting. And the Uncle Poacher. Jay's accident-prone uncle, who is portrayed as deceased in the story. Jay compares Harris to Uncle Poacher as he thinks both of them cannot do anything without making mistakes. So, now we talk about the theme of the story. Humor and is relatively play a major part in the story and are the principal themes. Jay states that the point of view determines whether a person finds a situation funny. Beyond that, acknowledgement of this relativity leads to a new understanding of humor. The other unique thing about 3 Men in a Boat is that Jay uses observational humor. For example, he comments that the rope has spiritual ability to tangle even without human involvement. The same joke has lived on the modern culture with twinkle lights, which always seems to tangle once removed from their packaging. Observational comedy became popular in the 1950s, so this book is interesting in that it proves this style of humor was in the use decades earlier. The other major theme in 3 Men in a Boat is the peace of the narrator. As mentioned previously, the story moves as the river does. For the most part, Jay tells the story and all the stories within the story at a relaxed place, but there are certain moments and scenes where the tension rises. This is the way a river can become powerful in certain areas while remaining calm in the others. In the late 19th century, the book did not receive favorable criticism. Despite that, it was popular with many copies sold and translations produced in many languages. More recently, Three Men in a Boat has found a home in the top book list, including the 100 Great Novels of All Times in 2003 and 50th Funniest Books Ever in 2009. So, this is a short summary of that novel because this novel has many scenes in it. So, if you like to read or continue it, you can go through the novel Three Men in a Boat because this will be more funny and you'll all love it. So please go through it. And I think hope you all like this short summary. And thank you for the opportunity.